Hello everybody, Simuzache Kaloa here from Code and Parallel. Now the two questions that I've seen in the comments. The first question is, how do you introduce dependency injection within the infrastructure layer, which is a class library, because it does not come with a dependency injection container. The second question is, how do you do things like migrations within the infrastructure layer? If you have those questions, then this video is going to help you with that problem. All right, so let's create a new application. And we're going to use a class library. Okay, so class library, click next. So this would be our clean architecture slash infrastructure. Let's go to clean architecture, dependency injection DI. Click next. So I'm not going to do all 4 projects in this video. If you need that, then go to the description and follow what clean architecture is. I just want to show you how you would introduce dependency injection within a library and how that would fit into a clean architecture environment. So we're going to assume that this is just the infrastructure. We're going to assume that we have the domain and the application layers already. So that's the assumption we're gonna make. I want you to delete that. Okay, so I'm gonna break the pattern a little bit here. I'm gonna bring in the model, and I'm gonna bring in entity framework. So we are going to use entity framework to test if our dependency injection works. I don't know if that makes sense. So first of all, I want you to create an interface. So this interface is just going to demonstrate what we need. So I want you to click add new item. Okay, so we're building a movie rental, so I think we're just going to use something similar. Okay, so interface, go with movie rental DB context. Okay, so ideally this would be in the domain, but they're going to be here just for the sake of demonstration. All right, so if there are any questions, put them in the comments. All right, so that's our interface. Let's make it public. All right, leave it there. So let's just create a module called movie, which will just pretty much just have a movie so that we can test it. And let's just make it a basic class, nothing fancy. I just want to put 2 things. And movie ID, and just give it a name, string name. And, all right, string empty. Okay. So in this context, when you're creating it, we want you to have okay, so before we do that, let's bring it into the framework. So I click on the project. You're gonna go to manage NuGet packages. So we'll just bring it into the framework. You're gonna go to browse, just type entity framework, and that should go to the web and search. So we need tools. That's gonna help us with migrations. We need tools, we need, I think, actual interface call, but if you install tools, since that's a dependency, it will install that for you. We need design and SQL Server because we're using a SQL Server database. And we're going to use the one within Visual Studio, so there's no need for you to install a standalone SQL Server. Of course, you might need that when you're going live. And the good thing is, if you have it installed, you just change where you point to it, so it shouldn't be hard. Right? If this could be any faster, that would save us some time. Alright, so we've done tools. Let's do SQL Server. If you're doing another database apart from SQL Server or SQLite, you're going to install its subsequent extension over there. Okay, so let's do that. Do we need design? I do not think so. If we need it, it's going to advise. So go to the iMovie DB context. I'm going to have a DB set here. Let's bring in control.find from a core. So you're gonna want to have the class movie to run the migration. And you can call that movies. You get and you set. All right, that should be fine. So as you're doing a movie context, as you're implementing it, you also need to have live table. Fair enough. So now we are going to need to have the actual implementation of this interface. Okay, so create a class, call it movie rental DB context, which is going to implement the DB context as well as that context. So create a class, call it movie rental DB. There you have it. Make it public, and it has to inherit from DB context as well as the DB context. So control dot for this, and since it's an interface and we give it a movie context, it's going to need to have that within it. Okay, so we're gonna need to have a constructor, so ctor, and if you forward my videos, this is takes in a DB context options. So DB context options, and that it just takes in the actual context. So bring that there, and if we call that options, could be any name, doesn't matter. And you need a base and pass it that options. All right. Excuse me. And this is going to be a get, and that's going to be a set. Okay. Pretty much done with that. All right. So we've done our context. This will help us talk to entity framework. We have a module which we tend to create a table out of, and we have an interface that just binds the contract. So now this is the most important part. This is when you introduce the dependency injection. So I want you to create a class. You call it dependency injection or dependencies, whatever makes sense. I'm going to use dependency injection. So call it dependency injection. All right. So this is where we're going to handle our dependencies. Okay. Unlike APIs that come out of the box with a DI container, a library doesn't have, so you have to set up yourself. It's kind of fun. It also helps you to understand the fundamentals. Sometimes building from scratch really helps. So I want you to create a class, public static So what does that? So we're gonna have an iService collection. Let's bring it in and see what it does. What does it do? Specify the contract for a collection of service descriptors, right? And we're gonna call this function. Okay, you can call it whatever you want. Implement persistence. Implement persistence. Okay, and sorry about that. And what's the error? Yeah, we'll get in there. And then you're gonna give it an iService collection of those services, as well as an iConfiguration, which would be used to get our configuration files, which you're going to see where it comes handy. Configuration. All right, bring it in. Control dot configuration. Nice. All right. So what service do we need? So usually this is what we do in the API dependencies container. You're gonna say, get me the services in the iService collection, and I want you to add a DB context. And DB context gets your context, which in this case is the movie rental DB context. All right. So wait, can I cancel that? And we are not responding. All right. So give it the context, and once you do, then you're gonna have options. This pops up. All right, so options dot, you want to use SQL Server and SQL Server. I should have turned this off, but my apologies. I'm doing this way at night, so it's pretty much freestyle. Haven't really. So we're gonna use the configuration we had there to get us the connection strengths. And what should we call that? We can call that default connection. Default connection, and you'll see where it comes in handy. And from there, we're gonna need to have a migrating assembly, so it knows which assembly it will migrate from. Because this is its own assembly. You could have multiple assemblies, but we're saying use the one we're dealing with to get that assembly. So you could say, let me get to the next line. So you could say b dot migrating assembly, and we're gonna use a little bit of reflection here. Don't worry about that if you don't know about it. We're trying to reflect, trying to get an assembly. Okay, I think we could make a video on that. It's sometimes called an advanced feature, but you could get the hangs of it. So we have that. Then we could add, since it's a dependency injection container, then we could give it a service lifetime. And if you don't know what a service lifetime is, it's just how long you want an instance in that container that's been resolved to stay in memory. So what have we done here? We are saying bring in services DB context. All right. What else do we need? We've got this. So I've put in an interface so that we can also see how we can resolve an interface and the class using the DI container which we've set up. So that's it. So it's gonna come in handy here, so that you see how to bring in. I think those two are the most used ones, so I think they will come in handy. So services dot add scoped, I think. Okay, and moderator context, and it's gonna get in what? So find the class. So it's a provider. I call that a provider. And it goes to, let's go to the next page. Goes to provider and get a service. Get service, and that service should be your class implementation of that, your concrete implementation of that, which is movie rental. And you want to close that out and do that. And in the end, this should just return services, because what we are going to, since this is static, you could also make that static. So we're going to call this DI container within another assembly. So we have to return, so when it calls, it gets all those assemblies. So with this line of code, we have actually built our own DI container. Okay, where we're saying our dependency is a database in the framework, it's there. And we want you to resolve these two dependencies, right? So at this juncture, you're done. What's remaining now is to use this, because a class library is just a functionality that you use common and you want to call from it. So we've just made the library. So now let's try to see if we can call from it using another layer. So we're going to create an API project, which is now going to use this library, right? So add new project. API. Okay, so the whole concept of a library is to use it, to reuse it. So call this clean architecture. Clean architecture .api. Okay. So instead of us handling the dependencies in the API project like we did in the previous video, and I did that on purpose so that I didn't want to complicate things, what I'm going to do here, we'll simply call those dependencies in the library through the dependency injection container of the API. Okay, if that sounds confusing, let's just follow. All right. So the API is going to depend on the infrastructure because of this example, but it shouldn't be like that, right? Okay. So I want you to click on dependencies, add project reference, and add infrastructure. What I'm trying to show you here is how these things are done, how you bring dependency injection. So usually you go to the program class and you'll see that your DI container is already set up here. Here it is, it's already set up. But what we've done here is to create our own dependency injection container. In fact, we could call this a DI container if we wanted to, all right? And when we get to the API, we don't want to reference these things. No, we just want to call this implement persistence. And if I say implement persistence, so that thing. So, and then do nothing about it. So what am I trying to say? What we'll do here is we just say implement infrastructure dependency injection container. All right. So what you're going to do there is very, very simple. Just one line of code. You're going to say, well, builder. Just make sure it's before this code. This is the final step. You're building your dependencies. Builder.services. Dot. It should come. It's called what? It's called implement persistence. Implement. Allow me to copy that. Implement persistence. And what does it take? It's taking the builder to configuration. All right. Do you have an error? Control dot to bring that using statement in. And it seems we are having issues. So builder.services.implement. And who do we blame now? Who do we blame for this thing not working? Do we have the dependency? Yes, we do. Why are we getting so public static class? Public static class. Then we've got iService collection. We've coded that. Then what are we really missing here? All right, we need to make it explicit and use this over there. That's it. Yep. All right. So there we go. With this line, we've registered all our services under here, under this implementations in the container of an API. So what are we really doing here? We are saying we just want to use another dependency, which makes sense because in clean architecture you want the infrastructure to focus on infrastructure stuff. Now, if we run a migration in infrastructure via the API, we are violating that principle. So here we'll run the migration within the infrastructure. So you might have wondered, in the dependency injection container for the infrastructure, there was this default connection, right? So because you're going to host the API, so you don't have your configurations in the API. So we're going to go to the app settings.json and we're going to add, first of all, we are going to add what we call connection strings, right? So connection strings, and this one was called default connection. So we're going to call it that, bring it over here, and we're using the Microsoft SQL Server Express. So what you do is you're going to say server, if I can spell that, server is equal to, I want you to put local db / MySQL MSQL local db. Okay, so that lets it know that we are dealing with Express, and then we're gonna have database. I'm gonna call it clean db. Then we're gonna have the connection. Okay, so connection. So is it trusted? So trusted connection. Trusted connection. Let it be true. Okay, and trust me, you're done. All right, so we have officially done this. So let's see if that's gonna work. I want you to go to tools, get package manager, go to package manager console. Now for this thing to work, you see there's a default project over there that has to be infrastructure because that's the assembly you want to migrate with. But for the startup, it's going to be the API. So set the API to startup, to set a project, and I want you to type add migration, and let's call this initial migration. All right, place. Well, this won't go through because for you to run a migration in the API, the API will be the startup, but it runs the migration within the infrastructure. But since we're using the startup as the API, then we need to bring in one dependency which will be used for the migration, which is Entity Framework tools. Okay, so you don't need the SQL Server, you don't need the what. And it kind of makes sense because if you need the SQL Server and the API, then you're breaking the logic because that has to be in the infrastructure where you're actually using the SQL Server. So type Entity Framework. All right, and just look for tools and bring that in. And once that comes in, then all you're going to do is go to the package manager console, tools, then go to the where is the package manager console? It's a server, and then we could look for the package manager console, add migration, is press enter. And I want you to notice if the migration, see where the migration folder is going to come. All right, would be in the API? Is it going to be in the infrastructure? We'll find out. So our build is successful. All right. Lo and behold, your migration is now in the infrastructure. So you've successfully brought that into your, let's see if we can open that migration to see. So the table we're building there, it's movies. And if we go to the package manager console, we just do update database to effect those changes. It appears my laptop is running out of power, so might as well plug it in before this tutorial ends up in smoke. All right, done. And if you go to the SQL Server Object Studio, I expect you to see the clean DB created. So let's refresh that. Go to the local DB databases. There it is. It should have not one but two tables, because one table is going to be the movies. The next one is going to be the one that it's using to track its migration. So I expect to have movies and EF history. And at this juncture, my friends, you have implemented a dependency injection container in a class library. It's that easy. It's not hard to set up, and it doesn't come out of the box. So I know people might be asking, where do you get the source code? So let's just check it out. Git changes. Create a Git repository. GitHub. All right. Okay. Quick NDI. So I have gone in time. So what I've done to my repo is, well, I've linked my Visual Studio to my GitHub, which you can do. But if I say create and push, it's going to send it straight to my GitHub, so that when you get here, so let's just configure username, and before let's configure that. All right, and save. All right, and we could push that. So pretty much easy now, just actually push to your GitHub, so that if we can go there now, we can go to our GitHub. It should be there now, so that you could just pull it and then use it. If you want to code it, you can code along with me. So if you go to my DB, so there it is. Nice and easy. So that's your URL, which I'm gonna share in the description. So if you have watched until this far, thank you very much. You've learned how to add a DR container in a class library. I might add with how to do it in a console application and whatnot. But if this gave you value, please kindly like, share, comment, subscribe. That keeps us going. And thank you very much, and do have a lovely night.